Good morning and welcome to our first webinar for 2024. I'll be your host. Ray Wright and Chi Carnegie will be the co-host here today. We'll talk about the new firmware release 10.2 for Orions, as well as the new configuration software NCD 3.4. Both of these are going to be released by February 14th, 2024. There's a chance they could be ready a little earlier than that, but that's certainly a safe date. Topics for today, we'll talk about 3 new hardware products that are supported by this new software and firmware. We have a set of AC metering and measurement cards for the OrionMX. This will enable us to bring a full set of power measurements into the OrionMX for source transfer and other applications. And that's a integration of the Bitronics instrument as well as the MX. We have 2 cards for the Orion I. They're specialty cards for specialty applications, and we'll talk about that, normally closed output, and the analog flex input card with the high voltage input for measuring the battery voltage. Software is fairly major in this release. We have a number of enhancements to our tile annunciator. We'll go through that in a lot of detail, plus an online demonstration. We've added some features to points blocking to make it a little easier to use to unblock points globally, and we're giving you ability to force that manually or through a point that's pulsed. A number of you have asked for us to distribute time in cascading. This would be where the Orion cascaded client, usually an RTU, would send time down to the cascaded Orion servers. And that's now built into the cascading protocol. Also, a number of you have asked for expansion of the Orion capacity in points and connections. So I'm now able to go to 80,000 and 512 respectively. And that is for an emerging application where Orion is used as a data concentrator. We're seeing more and more of those where Orion is concentrating data from lots of devices in the field. We also made some enhancements to redundancy to make the standby polling more intelligent, and we'll go through that. For those of you that use Orion as a SCADA master, we have some enhancements to ICCP and MultiSpeak to make it easier to connect to third-party systems, and a number of enhancements to the 870 protocol. First hardware product that we'll talk about, the AC meter cards for the MX. That's what they look like. That's actually a set of cards. You can either use 1 or 2. The base card is the AC meter expansion card, M1. And then there's an aux card that pancakes onto the M1 card to give you more calculations and a calculated neutral. This is a integration, as I mentioned before, of the Bitronics power measurement, which is an instrument that has AC analog inputs, and the OrionMX. So now those AC analog inputs go directly into these meter cards, bringing them, integrating them with the MX so that those values are directly available. A little more detail on the cards. Next slide. This is the AC meter card. There's PT inputs from bus 1 and or bus 2. Those are up to 600 volt. So they can be used in 480 volt applications where you directly bring in that voltage. We also have CT inputs, ABC phase, split core. These are split core auxiliary CTs that would clamp around the nominal 5 amp CT circuit and bring that down to a much lower level. Split core CTs can be installed without taking an outage. We use them in a number of applications where we are retrofitting our products into existing applications. The aux meter card, next slide, that pancakes on top of the AC meter card. It brings in additional split cord connections from line 2, plus brings in a measured neutral. Bring in measured neutral for line 1, and then it has that measured neutral for line 2. A few of our customers do think that measuring the neutral has some advantage in some applications. We want to support that. The relay grade Form C output, that's for a future application for synchro check. This product, these meter cards are based upon the PowerPlex 2, which is used in synchro check applications. So we want to support that as well. Building the output into the aux meter card enables the output to be closed very quickly after synchronism is achieved. Measurements, next slide. And there's everything. Measurements there. This is a full set of power measurements from bus 1, bus 2, line 1, line 2. And you can see that they're all there. There's some that you may not expect to be there. For instance, some of the symmetrical components, those are in there so that we can use them for protective relaying algorithms that we'll be putting into this product. We already have a protective relay algorithm that we use for the DGM. That's the overhead power monitoring system that we have that goes on the pole top. That's a definite time over current element, and it can be used in Flisser schemes to identify whether a fault was seen at that location or not. These symmetrical components will be used to add directionality to that overcurrent element, as well as supporting other functions in the future. One of the applications that we're looking at for this combination, next slide, is the transfer solution, source transfer. We currently provide a source transfer solution. We call it the automatic changeover device, ACOD. And it's a collection of Bitronics meters and IO and Orions. And it works great, but it does take up space, and it commercially is a little more costly than we would like to see. What's nice is that this combination of the OrionMX and the meter cards can do that application just like you see it there. That diagram is actually accurate. There's inputs and outputs. There's PT inputs from 2 sources, and the OrionMX in the 2S case can handle all of that. So the solution is simplified, and we're going to be defining this and making this our new ACOD solution. That solution involves all kinds of sophistication as to what you do if you lose the preferred source. Of course, you bring in the alternate, but what if the preferred source comes back? Do you bring that in? Sometimes there's also another source, so there's a lot of flexibility here. There's a lot to talk about with regard to the application of AC measurement and Orion automation. So in order to do that, next slide, we will be presenting that in a webinar. So in April, we'll go through a lot of detail, including how do you set up the meter card for these different applications. And we'll go into a lot of detail about this source transfer application. That's on April 17th. And all of you on today will certainly get an invite to that. IO cards for the Orion IO. Again, these are specialty cards for some specialty applications. The first one, this is an enhancement to the analog input flex card. And what that does, that's card number 6. What that does is it brings in a high voltage DC measurement on input 8. Inputs 1 through 7 are the same as the regular flex card. It's just input 8 is minus 300 to plus 300 volts. So it can be used to measure the substation battery. We also added a normally closed output card. Our card 0 output card is normally open. This adds another card for normally closed. And then we give you the ability to define how you want the LED to light. Do you want the LED to light when the contacts are closed or when the contacts are open, commanded open? So this lets you do that on a per point basis on that normally closed card and also on the normally open card. So it's both for cards type 0 and 7. We rattle off all these different cards. The next slide summarizes all of the different cards that are available. On the right there, you can see there's 2 discrete input cards, standard and wedded. And then there's 3 output cards now, normally open, normally closed, plus the high power output card, which can handle the inductive kick if the card should ever see that. There's a combination input output, and then again, the analog input cards. The difference between the flex cards and the regular AI card, the flex cards have the ability for software selection. The regular card 2, that AI card, that has to be wired differently to get different ranges, but the flex cards are software definable. The voltage input on the flex card also is much higher impedance, and that helps us out in a couple applications. Tile annunciator enhancements. Many of you have asked for the ability to define different colors for the alarm tiles. You can now do that in 10.2. What's nice is that if you are happy with the default, which is blinking red, solid red, or green, you can stay with that if you want. You don't have to change your configs. If you already have a config in 10.0 or earlier firmware, you can still go with that. But what's nice is you can define a new default. So you can say if you don't want something blinking or you want different colors, you can define that default. And then you can define as many other color types for your alarms for special alarms. Maybe some alarms are more critical. You want to highlight that and distinguish that from the other alarms. The other thing we did is enable the name to be expanded to 45 characters. That's a lot of characters, but what we're finding is that some customers want to use the annunciator not just as, hey, something's wrong, but hey, something's wrong and here's where it is, or here's a code that tells you where to go and to find out how to deal with this. So they want to bring out more actionable information in the tile name. Those of you that use the alarm annunciator know that the contents, the number of the pages that are available to view tiles, those pages occur or are viewed on the left side of the screen, and of course they take up some space. Now you can collapse those links, those page links, so that you can use the full screen. We've also added event time so that you can, when you click on the tile, it'll tell you when that went into an event. And last but certainly not least is drag and drop. Again, many people are saying, can I just grab this point and drag it over to the tile? The answer is yes. And Chi will be showing you that in an extensive demo of this following these slides. Time sync in cascading, just like it sounds, the time in the cascaded Orion client, which is usually an RTU, that time will be sent down to the cascaded Orion servers. We're still completing some of the performance testing on that. I think it's going to end up somewhere between 10 and 20 milliseconds. So the servers will be synced up within 10 to 20 milliseconds of what the client time is. So regardless of how the client Orion is set up, whether that's set up with DNP, NTP, PTP, IRIG-B, whatever that time is, it will be sent down to the Orion servers. There's only a single selection, so this is very easy to use. And like many of the features we try to add, we try to make it easier to set up a system. So now in cascading, not only do you have simplicity in terms of your configuration, creation, and management, now you also have some simplification and engineering effort reduction in getting the time synced up. Next slide. Redundancy. We have a new capability to make the standby polling more intelligent. And by that, we're giving you 3 options now for how you want the standby Orion to poll. And one of these settings is just like today, always setting. Always means that all port devices on the standby always are polled. That's the default, that's the current functionality. The next setting would be where you never, next slide, where you never want the standby Orion to poll any devices. This would be a situation where you have devices that can't be polled by both the active and the standby Orion for one reason or another. Either they can't take two TCP connections, or the media doesn't support it, or it's RS-45, or whatever the case may be. There are plenty of situations where you don't want the standby Orion to be polling while the active Orion's polling. So that's the never setting. We do support this now, but only if you write Lua logic. So this new smarter standby polling would make it so you don't have to write Lua logic. And then the next one, which is more significant, is this COM fail one. Next slide. The COM fail setting basically says that if the active Orion is unable to poll the devices on a port, start polling those devices on the standby Orion. That doesn't cause a throwover to the standby Orion, but it just gets the standby Orion to start polling on that port. That's going to be supported for DNP, Modbus, SEL, and 870. The other thing that's nice is that the standby Orion, which is polling those devices that can't be accessed by the active Orion, it will send the data to the active Orion without having to map the standby inputs. That saves you an engineering step there. Also, the active Orion will send controls to the standby when the standby is polling. So this simplifies matters considerably in applications where a fairly large number of the IEDs can't be polled all the time by both devices. Now, our original redundancy, ideally could be set up, and the way we designed it was to make it so that both devices, standby and active, could always poll all the IEDs. That's ideal, but we recognize that that's not always the case, and now we're adding more flexibility to deal with situations where all the IEDs can't be polled all the time by both Orions. Next slide. Point and connection expansions. The application that I diagrammed there, that's a data consolidation. You've seen these where these large enterprise applications are getting data from all kinds of underground devices or pole-mounted devices, and Orion is a very good data consolidator. Good drivers, good diagnostics and such. So often that's with DNP3, and there's a large number of devices, in many cases far more than the 256 limit that we have now, and more points. So now there's an added option, number 112, poll up to 512 DNP connections, and option 160 and 180 for 60,000 and 80,000 point expansion. We've tested this sufficiently to release both of these and all these options on the Orion LX Plus. Got a little more testing to do on the Orion SX to ensure that it's not problematic performance and temperature and that type of thing when combined with the large point count and large connections. Let's see, I think we have another slide here. That's it. At this point, we're going to go to the online demo, and she will show you some of these things. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so some of the items that Ray discussed today, I want to show demos. Some of the items will be more an extensive demo, so it'll be, for example, the meter card. We will have a dedicated power hour for that. And I believe Ray mentioned was in April. So the first thing I want to show is our enhancements to our telenunciator. So let me switch to my Orion SX. So for most of you who are using the telenunciator, you should be familiar with this interface. Pretty standard where you have green to show that it's normal alarm. And then if it's abnormal, if the point's abnormal, it goes red. Blinking indicate that has not been acknowledged. And if it's acknowledged, it stays solid. And then we do have a state, which is optional, where if it goes into alarm mode and back to normal without being acknowledged, it will be blinking green. So you should be very familiar with this kind of default option that we had if you're using tile annunciator. So that we didn't change. So that's still in play. If you don't want any fancy new enhancements, that still works with your configuration file. If you update your Orion to Distro 10.2, it's not going to break this. So we were very aware of this. So we did not change any of that. If you just want plainly leave everything to default. One thing that I want to show while we're in this interface here is that we added the ability to show or hide what we call kind of a navigation screen. So this screen navigates between the multiple pages of alarm, and you can kind of organize it the way you want it. We've done separate feeders and so on, and comms alarm. You can now hide that, and so you get more real estate on your screen. Sometimes if you have a touch screen at the substation, that touch screen might be smaller, so you want to see as much of the alarms as much as you can rather than having the navigation screen there. You can have it back up by clicking on that button. Now you can navigate between the pages. So just something that we had customers requested just to get more real estate, so we implemented in this feature, in this release. Another feature that we've added is now, if let's say you see this alarm is blinking, well, before, if you want to see when did that alarm change time-wise, you would have to go into our alarms tab here, go to alarm archive, which still exists, and you would have to look for that alarm and see when that time changed. So now what we've done is that if you go and click on that alarm, it now shows that this change state at this time. So you can see it right in the annunciator screen rather than having to navigate to the alarm archive screen. So again, just additional time-saving step just so that it's visually seen here without going to a different screen. All right, so what the main addition, I guess the main highlight that we've added is the ability to create more colors. So we've always been aware that, hey, our annunciator works, it's solid, but it lacks in customization flexibility. And we've had customers asking, hey, can we change colors? For example, if I want a major alarm to be a different color than my minor alarms. So we've taken your feedback and we've added that feature into 10.2. So for today, I'm going to show you how those features, how to configure that, so that if once 10.2 is released, you're more than welcome to upgrade your Orion and the new NCD and then try it out. All right, so right now I have a config running called SX demo. So let's pull up that config. And so if I go to my alarms, so this is our alarm archive retentive module. So that's all combined together. And as you can see, if you open an existing config, so we'll call this config legacy config. So this is a config that was already created before 10.2 is released. Again, we are very aware that we don't want to break anything, right? So as you can see, everything looks, the default looks the same, red, green, and so on. All that config is still retained. What we've added is now under the left-hand screen here, there is an alarm state color. So I want to kind of remind everyone, because we are opening a config that we created before 10.2 release when the new NCD was released, we have to be aware that, hey, before this, there was no such thing as an alarm state color option. So we have to leave this blank. So that's the main difference. If you open a existing config, this screen will have nothing listed in it because we need to account for older config. But if you do a new config, and I'm just going to do that one quickly just to show everyone. So let's do an Orion SX, click OK, and I go and configure my alarm. And you go to alarm state color, there will be one group already created in there, and that's our default group. That's the regular green and red that you've always been used to. So when you're opening a new config and new NCD, it will automatically have that group. And when you create a alarm point, let's just pick an alarm for, let's say, Ethernet activity, and you enable that alarm. Now you'll see that it automatically assigned to that default group. So a new config moving on, you will have a group and you can create more groups in that new config. What I want to focus on today is, hey, you do have an existing config and you want to add more colors to your alarms. That's going to follow a lot of people attending today. So we're going to do that example here. So let me close this so that I don't confuse myself. I don't want to save it. All right, so right now, technically, because it's an existing quote unquote legacy config, there is no quote unquote default. So we're gonna do a new default, and I'm gonna call this group default. And this default will have your normal green as normal. If it went to alarm and then it came back and it didn't get acknowledged, it will blink. You can have it disable or enable blinking or not. I'm going to keep that on. And then when it is in alarm mode, it is red. And if it's not unacknowledged, then it is blinking. So I'm going to keep that as default. The one thing that we did add, and I do want to kind of show, is the ability to show if a point's offline. So we never had this in our old tile annunciator. When a point's offline, you couldn't tell in the annunciator screen. So what we've done is that, hey, if the point is offline, you don't know what the state is, right? It's normal, abnormal. So now you have the ability to select what color it shows when it's offline. So we've kind of selected the pink cyan, I think it's cyan color, and now you can have it so it's disabled. So if it's disabled, then you won't see that offline state. But let's uncheck that. We're going to enable it. So that's our new default. So now we have a group, and how do I apply that group to all my current alarms? So let's go to my inputs, and I go to my binary alarms. And you can see here we have added a new column called alarm state color. So right now, again, because this is a legacy file, nothing will be in there, but we're going to assign the default to it. So what we're going to do, instead of doing it one by one, we're not going to do that because that's time consuming. We're going to, this is a little bit of review, NCD review for everyone. We're going to highlight it all. And we're going to do common attributes, alarm state, and we're going to all assign it to default one, to default group. That all gets selected. So now any of these alarms, it will have that default green, red, and now the whole pink offline will be applied to these alarms. All right, so now I'm going to go through an example of creating a totally different group. Let's call this, let's do a new group. And I'm going to do new. And let's call this a major alarm. So we want a kind of a major alarm to be a different color, just to be distinctive when someone's looking at the tile annunciator. So we're going to do some artsy stuff here. Let's do normal. Let's call it blue. The text here you can't really see very well, so let's change the text and make it, let's say, yellow. Seeing here if it's normal, but it never got acknowledged. So we're just going to do the same thing, blue with the text, but it's going to be blinking. And then for alarm state, let's make it gold. And let's keep that makes that text red. So you have the options to kind of change things, the combination as you want. So here you can see all the different states. And then again, I want my offline to be shown pink. This table down here, which we're not going to play around with it too much today, that's the same table that was in the web UI configuration, and that controls the color of your alarm tab. So we always had two kind of views of alarms. We had the tile annunciator and we had this kind of table view. And you've always been able to change the color of these, and that was configured in the web UI. This is still the same capability. You just now are doing it in NCD now. Because when we added this feature in, we figured we should combine all the color settings to one location rather than one's in the web UI and one's in NCD. So this is just more of a cleaner way of configuring those colors. But,
that's right. You can add in a blink. We didn't have the blink capability before.
Oh, for the table? Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. All right, so we created a major alarm. We kind of changed the colors. We click OK. And now what I can go do is go back to my alarms and I say, well, what point do I want to consider to be a major alarm? So I'm just going to go and change one point for simplicity's sake. Major alarm, and now that's applied. And so I'm going to go to one of my tile annunciator screen. Again, you should be very familiar with the screen, but as Ray mentioned, we did add in a feature, and and I actually was very excited when this feature got released because I was asking for it, and I'm sure other people have asked too. When I first learned about tile annunciator, for me, it was more intuitive to go and drag it to the tile. And we weren't able to do that before. Before, you actually had to select the point, put right, it goes into the table, and then you move it in the table. You can still do that now, right? But we've added an additional feature that you can now actually move it in the tile, whatever available space. It's more intuitive, and as you can see on the table here, it also moves with it too. So very as much as it's a simple enhancement, for me, this is, I got very excited when I heard about this. All right, so another thing that we did is we also did a preview. We like to do previews. So remember the IO captions, you can see a preview, what it looks like on the Orion IO screen. So this is an additional preview that we added. So now you can actually see what your alarm looks like when it's in a alarm mode that's not acknowledged. So just to make sure that your color was all set up correctly, you can all test it here before pushing it to the Orion. Acknowledge, it stops blinking. Unacknowledged, but it went back to normal. Everything looks good there. And then offline, as you remember, we made it pink. So yeah, the preview, very helpful. You can see what it looks like without having to push to the Orion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this config to my desktop. Let's go call this Power Hour PH. Go to my Orion. Let's push this config down. And then I'm going to make sure I switch the config to PH. Activate. We'll let the config settle in a little bit, and then we'll go and take a look at our annunciator screen. Let's make sure everything looks good. Not yet. So since I'm switching configs completely, it takes a fair bit of time, so we should be able to work now. So now you can see our screen slightly changed. I added in that one alarm with the different groups associated with it. You can see it's the color of text and background that I selected. We can do some demo in a sense. Let's do some points block, not points blocking, forcing of points. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this, let me do a new tab actually. Let's do data values, open new tab. So this way everyone can see. So this is a good recap if no one has force a point. So this is a recap. Let's say I want to force a point in my alarm archive retentive module. We can go and look for that. And you can see all the points that you configured in that module. And to force points, make sure, I'm sure people have ran into this many times, your Orion's unlocked. If the lock's shown that it's locked, you need to log in, click on it and log in again. And again, for a good recap for anyone who hasn't upgraded their Orion to 10 or higher, we did add a search function capability. So let's say I'm looking for this point. Instead of going through this list to find it, I can go and filter it out. All right, so I want to force this point. So right now is 1. We can do force value of 0. And you can see it changes color right away. I can go and remove that force. It goes back. And another thing I want to show is, let's say 0 and comms is offline. And you see now it's pink. And because it was unacknowledged, it still stays blinking. You can acknowledge it if you want. It goes solid. So yeah, so we tried to make it very easy as possible. Just kind of recap. You want to create your group first and then assign whatever point that you have in your alarm to that group. You can, as you can see, you can add a lot of groups in. So yeah, so depending on your application, you can add as many groups as you want. And as long, what I would recommend is to not have too many groups, because if you have too many groups, then the engineer or technician goes in. If there's so many colors blinking, they don't know what those groups are. So obviously this one we said it was a major alarm. And it was this color, and this is a let's say a minor alarm. That's just a recommendation, but this is your system. Go ahead and create as many groups as you like. All right, and so what I want to show next is Ray, just confirm, did I miss anything for the alarms?
I think you showed the collapsing of the page. I may have missed that.
Yeah.
Yep.
We did that.
Yeah,
Perfect.
one of the intentions here was to make it so that this tile annunciator could match other legacy annunciators. There's a lot of older annunciators out there that are being upgraded or replaced, and this does give us the ability to match the color and blink scheme.
Perfect. Thanks, Ray. All right, so the thing I want to show next is what it seems simple, but again, we got request and we've added in is points blocking, an additional feature in points blocking. So going to my config, I'm just going to quickly create points blocking. For anyone who doesn't know what points blocking is, the ability to have a separate set of points for, so what the way I explain is kind of duplicating your points, your slave points or server points. In this way, you have this one set that goes to your SCADA, one set that goes to your alarm, as an example. And if you are doing commissioning or testing, these points can change internally at the substation, but SCADA won't see it or your alarms won't see it. So it's more for testing purposes. So let's say you're doing some testing, you don't want SCADA to be scared because they didn't know that you're doing testing and they see all these alarms coming in. So this is a way to create a separate set for each location. It could be multiple SCADA and they have separate set, or or a set of point that goes to your tile annunciator, for example. So what some of our customers are using points blocking, and we're gonna quickly create a setting. So I'm just gonna have a setting for, let's say, my IO. We're gonna create, let's just say we're doing testing on these inputs and we're gonna have it blocked. And so we actually have 2 sets of points that you can use to send up to SCADA or your alarm. And the way points blocking work is that you have the ability on the web UI to block certain points so that SCADA doesn't get its state, or you can block all and so on. So I'm just going to do a quick example. Not going to focus on what the functionality of points blocking. I'm just going to focus on the added feature to it because some of the attendees here today do use points blocking in their configuration. All right, so I'm going to save this. And so what we've added is that now when you do points blocking, you always have the ability to send to SCADA how many points are being current blocked, but SCADA never had the ability to unblock all points. And so now what we've done, if I go to my server port and I go to my output pick list and filter down to points blocking. Now we created this point here to send up to SCADA so that in the event that you are doing testing at the substation, you block some points and you walked away forgetting to unblock it, to either drive back to the substation, go to the Orion, unblock it all, or you can call SCADA and say, hey, I forgot to unblock the points. Can you send a control down to that Orion and unblock all points? So now we have that capability now. Before, we did not have this control point to unblock all points. And the points that I mentioned earlier that did already exist, and just again, a review for people, you can see the points, the different set of points that we create in points blocking, but you can send total amount of block points to SCADA, so that's that point that you would use. All right, so I'm going to send this config down and do a quick demo. And let's see when that config comes back up. So anyone's questioning why I opened the screen is that whenever you change your NCD config, even if you update it and so on, this screen will show you all the devices that are offline or online. Right now, I don't have anything connected to Orion, so that's why it shows red. But this screen will show something once your config is all settled in. While your config's switching, it might take a while depending on what you have, database or HMI or whatever. So I always like to see the screen, one, just to see what's online and offline, and two, if you see devices, it means your config is now all settled in. All right, so points blocking. So this is the screen that you would see. So I created those 3 points in points blocking. Let's say I'm doing some testing on binary input 1. I don't want these points going to SCADA, for example. So I'm going to block these points. Let's just do a set. And so before, you've always had this option to unblock all points on the web UI. We never had that option going to SCADA. And so again, based on request, what we've done is now go to my forcing screen that we were using. My real estate's a little bit small. All right, that looks a little bit better. We're gonna go and look for my points blocking outputs. And now pretend this point is being sent up to your SCADA. Your SCADA goes and send a pulse. Of 1. Oops. I need a bigger monitor. And then we're going to send a value of 1 to pulse that control. And we are going to go and clear all the points blocking. So it is the same thing as if you clicked it here on the web UI. Now you just have the ability to do it from SCADA. All right, so that's additional feature that we added in 10.2. I know some people online right now did request that, so hopefully you can start using that right away. So a few things I want to show in NCD that Ray mentioned. There are new IO cards. So IO, this is a good review. We're going to create a new IO configuration. Advanced display. And let me close this config so that I don't get confused. All right, so I go to my IO. To add a card, you always go to hardware, IO card, and you're going to add new card, similar configuration. So now on the card list, you should see more. Let's say we start, we want to type 8. That's the one with the one analog input that is for your battery monitoring, so HV. Click accept. Your card A. You can see now that you can go and select, and then you can see that 1 to 7 is your regular card, and you can select your ranges, and then for your high voltage, it is -3 to 300 volts for -3 to 300. Similar configuration as other cards. You can do your engineering min max so that on your display screen, it can have engineering units. So it could be what values represent temperature, for example, and so on. So that's all still the same as if it's a regular flex analog input card. So nothing new. A good reminder to anyone who is still new with Orion IO, when you're creating cards, card A is at the bottom of the IO and it works its way up, A, B, C, and D. So always start with the bottom up. The reason being is the main board's at the bottom and we stack the cards up from bottom to top. You don't have to fill their IO fully with all 4 cards. So you can have card A and card B, and then C and D, you don't have to configure if there's nothing in those slots. So that's just a quick review. Let's add another card, which is a card 7. This will look pretty similar to our other output card, but this is just a normally closed output card. And you can see here, you can select your outputs. And then you just have to be aware that this is a normally closed, and you can invert your LEDs based on what you want to see on your Orion IO in the front. Again, you can do mode, pulse, latch, TC pairs, similar as to the other output card. Again, similar to your captions, you can now customize, that's always been, customize your caption to have more of descriptive name for your output. So it displays in the front of the display screen on the Orion IO. All right, so that's the IO card. We didn't make it hard. It's the same procedure as any other card. Now you just have those options in that pick list there. And then last thing I want to show is, anything, you want me to show anything, Ray, before I do the Cascade time sync configuration?
Just the cascading would be good. Yeah.
Okay. But this is a good review for anyone. If I do new, this caught me a few times when I was new at NovaTech, is I want to create a Cascade file right now. Why is my Cascade checkbox gray out? And we get a lot of calls for this. And so as a good review, within NCD, you can always open multiple configs, right? You saw that I had multiple configs earlier here. But when you open a Cascade file, it has to be the only config open. So it's just the limitation of NCD, because Cascade has a lot of, you can have a lot of Orions attached to it. So we made it very strict rule in the sense for cascading config, it's the only config open on the NCD. So if I close this config, let's not save this. Now there's no configuration open. Now when I create a new, oops, I clicked way too fast. New Alex Plus, now that checkbox is able to be selected. So anytime you guys see that being grayed out, you have something open. Again, you can do what options you have on your Alex Plus as an example. Click OK. So because this is a cascaded, you can now select what IP address your Orion Alex Plus, which is acting as a cascaded client. You can configure this, If you need encryption between your Cascaded client and Cascaded server, you just gotta make sure you have certificate and keys already loaded on the Orion, and you just pick your pathways for there. If you don't have encryption, you can uncheck that. Same as always, Cascade configuration, we did not change any of that. TCP port, same thing. We always had a default 50,001. You can change that as you please. So what we've added is the capability of time syncing. So as Ray mentioned, if your Cascaded client is time synced with NTP, IRB, and so on, whatever that time is, it gets sent down. Even if it doesn't, even if it's not being time synced with anything, it will send whatever its system time is down to your Cascaded server. By default, we have once a day. We're going to time sync your devices. You can change this time if you want. We think once a day is sufficient, but again, depending on your application, you might want to change it to be quicker or slower. Once you click done, it's similar to any other Cascaded configuration. You can go and add a device. So let's say our IO, click OK. And because we are selected time sync at the Cascaded client side, by default, this is already selected on the server side. So you can't change it. It's already pushed through. So you click it in one place, set the time, you're done. And then that's what cascading looks like with time sync. If you want to change that setting, go back to the client, go to edit Orion information, and you can go and change that if you don't want time sync or change anything else in here. So it's not written in stone. You can always go back and change these settings. So those are the new features. I don't think I missed anything. Ray, were we good, or do you want me to go through
we're good.
anything?
The only question that some folks may have is some of the earlier announcements for this webinar said that we would talk about the Orion VX. That's our first virtualized Orion. We did not include that in this webinar. It's a bigger topic than we can handle in just a minute or two. And we have a dedicated webinar for that in March on the Orion VX. But just to give you kind of a sneak peek, the VX basic product coding is complete, and we are starting to provide demonstration systems for customers that have requested it. We're updating some of the NCD side of it. There's still some software changes there, but the basic VX runs in a virtualized environment, and we have more information we can provide to you between now and that webinar. Also, those of you that will be at DistribuTech will have demonstrations of the VX there.
Perfect. I know a lot of questions come in, but what we'll do is we'll be sending out a post-webinar email. So your questions, look out for those in your inbox. We will have all your questions answered. In this way, everyone will see your questions too and see the answer to it. So look out for the post-webinar email. And if you don't have a login for a customer support site, register for it. We'll approve it within a day. And our support site has changed so that it's linked to our Power Community. So your login should work with the support site as well. And that's where you download your firmware, your new NCD. So when we release Distro 10.2 and then new NCD 3.4, you will be able to download from the support site. You will get an email that is officially released. And as a reminder, as Ray mentioned, our estimated date right now for those releases is February 14th. If it's earlier, I'm sure you'll see it in the email. So look out for that. And as a reminder, we still have our sales engineer booking site. It's booking.novatechautomation.com. This is where you can go and select what specific sales engineer you want to meet, or you can select anyone and they'll assign whoever's available. Our calendar is synced to the system, so if we're not available, you won't be able to select that time slot. It's designed to be 30 minutes, depending on your question. We can push it longer if we need to. but we can assist you with any application-based questions. We do have our list of sales engineer here. We do have specific, for example, Ben's very good at Lua and scripting, so he can help you with that. Carlos is Spanish speaking, so on. But for the most part, all of our sales engineers are very knowledgeable in all our products. All right, so that is it. Thank you again for joining our Power Hour. We will see you next month. And what's next month, Ray? Do you remember? I believe it's Chronos.
Chronos Series 3. Series 3 is the largest version of our Chronos series clocks. It's the one that has support for precision time protocol, very high accuracy, very good stability, very good lock, and redundant networking support as well.
Perfect. So look out for emails inviting you to that Chronos webinar. I believe you can register it for now on our website, and we will look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.